Before we started the call, you brought up with me that it's not just the United Nations that the Chinese Communist Party is involved in. There's lots of other international organizations that the CCP has its tentacles in. What are some of those organizations, and what's that impact?
Well, there's the whole family of UN agencies, and that's everything from the International Civil Aviation Organization, which manages the planes flying in the air, and the seabed mining agency that looks at what happens on the seabed in terms of who has the right to the minerals found on the seabed. Shipping, there's an alphabet soup out there of UN agencies, funds, and programs, and Beijing is all over them like white on rice, as we say. And then there's the Bretton Woods institutions where China, the World Bank, the IMF, and where China has been consistently demanding a larger role, and without necessarily paying more, and without relinquishing their status as borrowers and their ability to tap into preferential and concessional lending, even as they demand more decision-making authority and power.
Well, like the biggest recipient of World Bank loans is China, right?
Yes.
Because they're a developing country.
And they're the largest developing country. Well, India is now larger, so... But yes.
It's just the chutzpah of the CCP to then go in and be like, we also want control of this organization that's giving us all this money.
Yeah, with support for a long time, the United States and other. Look, we operated under this delusion, not me, but I would say the United States and many policymakers in the United States and Europe operated under several delusions for many decades. One, that the change through trade and that engagement would make them more like us delusion, the China fantasy that if we engage with them and we do business with them, then they will liberalize and become more like us. That has not proven to be the case. A subset of that delusion was that if we bring them into all of these international organizations, the so-called rules-based order, that we will socialize them to accept and operate within these frameworks. Again, the opposite has happened. They've corrupted and turned these institutions to make them more amenable to making them safe for Chinese autocracy. So I think, again, we now have a at least growing understanding in the United States and among our allies that we were wrong in our assumptions there. But in the process of 3 decades of this delusion, we created a monster, and we've given them a lot of tools and opportunities to insinuate themselves into these institutions and begin rewiring them to make them more amenable to Chinese dictatorship.
Is it too late to do something about that?
I don't know. The question is a good one, and I think the jury is out. I think it depends on what we're willing to do and how serious we're willing to take that effort and how important these institutions are to us.
It seems like if all of these institutions rely on U.S. funding, if the U.S. pulls the funding, then what is China going to be taking over?
Well, they'll have to start funding it, right? And then they'll have even more power.
No.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know that they're in a position right now to do that. I mean, you've seen, especially in the past 3 years, that they've cut back on Belt and Road spending. It's gone way down. Their economy is in real trouble internally. And so the cracks in the China model are starting to become more visible. And so I think that, well, I don't believe that we can count on them to collapse of their own weight. I think we need to do everything we can to make sure that we're enabling that process. But it would, I don't know if it would shock you or not, to know that there are, even at this point, people within the United States government and definitely people within European governments who are deathly afraid of the collapse of the Chinese Communist Party because they are much more comfortable dealing with the devil they know than with what might come next. So it's really hard to convince people to take an approach that either implicitly or explicitly is aimed at weakening the CCP's hold on power in China.
That was the same thing with the Soviet Union, right?
Yes, nothing has changed there.
Well, what's ironic is that they think it's the devil they know, and they're afraid of the alternative, but they actually don't know the devil.
Yeah.
Because if they think that when China at the UN says we're talking about a shared future for all humanity and win-win mutual cooperation, and they think those are good things, they do not understand this devil at all.
I mean, I think it's kind of like the CCP's like propaganda about the importance of stability has influenced people to believe that, okay, it is like the CCP says, without the CCP, there would be no new China, right? So they can't conceive of a China without the CCP. So when the CCP is like, we make things stable, like that's like stability is the most important thing. It's like they basically bought into it.
Yes. Well, and they even extrapolate it to think that the CCP cares about the stability of other countries, when I think that, they care about stability inside China, but I think that they're perfectly comfortable dealing, at least under Xi Jinping, definitely under Xi Jinping, they are comfortable with a high level of instability in other countries as long as it creates opportunity for them to go in and exploit resources or work with politically vulnerable but very powerful people, like in the case of Myanmar or other countries that are facing internal strife, or Afghanistan, where the CCP is perfectly happy to go in and engage in resource extraction for its own purposes in very unstable places, as long as they can navigate that, because the West, the United States, we're much more risk averse and are not going to go into those places, and they have it basically to themselves.
So this might be a difficult question to answer, but for anyone watching, what can they do about this kind of corruption in the UN?
Well, I think, first of all, take your rose-colored glasses off and stop just assuming that the UN is some benign entity that's a bunch of do-gooders doing good things. And talk to your members of Congress about your concerns about, what it means for the Chinese Communist Party and the PRC to wield the level of influence that they do within this institution, why it's possible for them to do this, and whether it's still a good investment for the United States to continue pouring money into these institutions, given both what China has been able to accomplish in terms of exercising malign influence there, and how malign these institutions are, even aside from China's influence. I think that, at least in the United States and in other democracies, we still get to have a say about these things, and can agitate with our members of Congress and senators and ask them for accountability, even if we can't expect accountability from the United Nations.
Because that's our money being spent.